When the kidnappers forced Alexander to choose between me and his childhood sweetheart, he gave up his childhood sweetheart and chose me. But I didn't go with him. Because I knew he would regret it. In my previous life, after I was rescued, Alexander's childhood sweetheart was photographed by the kidnappers in compromising positions. She returned home that night and slit her wrists. Alexander pretended not to care and went through with our wedding as planned, but after we were married, he made me suffer endlessly. 7 years later, I finally forced him to agree to a divorce, but on the way to the divorce proceedings, he lost control and drove the car off a cliff. Even as he lay dying, he blamed me. We owe Lil this. This life was meant to atone for her. What right do you have to live in peace? So if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't live that way. Lave, come with me. When I realized I had been reborn, kidnappers were holding knives to my neck and Lily's. They demanded that Alexander choose one of us to be saved. Alexander's gaze flickered between the two of us. After a fierce internal struggle, he made the same choice as in his previous life. He reached out his hand toward me. But I shook my head firmly. Alexander, save Lily first. In this life, I didn't want to owe anyone, let alone live with the weight of another person's life on my shoulders. Alexander seemed to relax upon hearing my words. Lave, you're my fiancé. I should have saved you first. But since you've made your choice, don't blame me. He then took Lily and left the scene as quickly as possible, fearing I might change my mind. But I wasn't like him. Once I made a decision, I never looked back. In the previous life, it was the same. He came with the money, but the kidnappers demanded more, saying they could only take one person. Alexander had no choice but to choose me. However, during the time we were trying to raise the money, the kidnappers took advantage of the situation, took indecent photos of Lily, and were about to assault her. Fortunately, we arrived with the police in time. Even though they didn't go through with it, the situation alone was enough to shatter a young girl's dignity. Lily returned home in a daze and slit her wrists after everyone had fallen asleep. By the time they discovered her, it was already too late. When Alexander heard the news, he didn't seem to care at all. He handled Lily's funeral arrangements calmly and gave a large sum of money to her family. Even when I suggested postponing the wedding, he refused outright. Liv, marrying you was something I had planned long ago. I can't let outsiders influence me. But it was precisely those outsiders he had mentioned who had tormented her for 7 years. Marrying me was just a way to trap me and make me atone for Lily's sins. But what had I done wrong? After Alexander and the others left, I began to think of ways to save myself. Because this time, I wasn't sure if Alexander would come back. In my previous life, he used the excuse of hugging Lily to slip a tracking device into her pocket. So even if the kidnappers changed locations, we could find Lily immediately through the tracking device. But just now, he seemed to have forgotten about it. I suspect that from the very beginning, the only person he wanted to save was Lily. It was just because of my fiancé status that he reluctantly chose me, fearing criticism from others. After all, our marriage was arranged by our families, and our feelings weren't that strong to begin with. Lily had spent her most innocent years with him. They were childhood sweethearts and true confidants. It's only natural that Alexander would regret it in the previous life. In this life, he finally got his wish. I'm happy for him. At the same time, I didn't forget to look for an opportunity to escape. I knew that when the kidnappers moved locations, they would pass by an auto repair shop. The mechanics there were known for being fierce and brutal. In my previous life, when the kidnappers passed by there, they tried to temporarily occupy the repair shop, but they didn't expect the shop owner to be such a tough guy who refused to budge. A group of them broke out into a violent fight. The kidnappers probably never imagined there were people even more ruthless than them. Fearing the situation would escalate, they had no choice but to flee in disgrace. Later, when the kidnappers were apprehended, the repair shop owner came forward to identify them. Now, just like in my previous life, they left one person in the car to watch me. The rest rushed toward the repair shop. My hands were tied behind my back, and the kidnapper sitting in the driver's seat didn't even bother to look at me. I took advantage of his distraction and bit through the door handle with my teeth. Then I pushed open the door and ran forward like a madman. My goal was the same as the kidnappers, the car repair shop. I was taking a gamble, betting that they wouldn't abandon me. So I charged in boldly. The repair shop was already in complete chaos. I spotted the young garage owner immediately. His features were sharp and handsome, exuding an air of righteousness. Combined with his agile movements, he had an indescribable coolness about him. Fearing I might hurt him, I crouched down and sprinted toward him as quickly as possible. But I exerted too much force and knocked him to the ground. When I fell into his arms, I was so scared my face went pale. "I'm sorry," I stammered, unable to form coherent words. "Please, can you save me?" The man glanced at me, furrowing his brows. The next moment, he wrapped his arms around me and rolled several times on the ground. Then, with a loud thud, the chair we had been lying on fell to the ground. If he hadn't noticed in time, I might have been in serious trouble. Still shaken, the kidnappers noticed I had escaped. What started as a standoff over territory had now turned into a hostage situation. Both sides faced off. I looked at the man beside me and whispered, "If you can save me, I'll do anything." But he didn't respond, instead staring at the kidnappers thoughtfully. Someone behind him couldn't help but remind him, "Chin, it's better not to get involved." So his name was Chin. With no response coming, my heart sank. Forget it, why push someone so hard? When the lead kidnapper called me over for the third time, I took a step forward. But soon, my shoulder was grabbed. I was forced to stop. Chin stepped forward and addressed the kidnappers, "I'm taking care of her today." It seemed like even the heavens were on my side, as the sound of a motorcycle roared outside. Chin's face lit up with a confident smile. "My backup has arrived." The kidnappers heard this, glared at me resentfully, and walked away muttering curses. The tension in my heart finally eased. I exhaled quietly and felt the rope on my wrist loosen. It was Chin who had cut the rope. "My name is Olivia. Thank you so much for saving me." I extended my hand to him. Chin, however, kept staring at my wrist, which was red and swollen from where the rope had cut into my skin. "Let me take care of that." I shook my head. "It's just a minor injury. It's nothing. Who was it who said that as long as I could save you, you'd do anything?" Without waiting for an answer, he pushed me onto a chair and fetched a first aid kit. "Bear with it." I bit my lip, watching him carefully tend to my wound. A warm feeling suddenly filled my heart. I remembered in my previous life, shortly after marrying Alexander, there was an instance where he had drunk too much. As I helped him back to the room, I casually mentioned that he should drink less. He flew into a rage and roughly pushed me away. I lost my balance and fell to the ground. The jade bracelet on my wrist hit the floor, shattering into pieces, and the shards cut my wrist. I screamed, covering my bleeding wrist and crying out in pain. Alexander saw this but only stared at me coldly and said, "Does it hurt?" "It should hurt. Lil suffered 1,000 times more than you, but she can't scream in pain anymore. If it weren't for trying to save you, she wouldn't have been humiliated by the kidnappers. And she wouldn't have done something so desperate." I sat there on the floor, my face filled with disbelief. My heart grew colder by the second. After a long while, I finally found my voice. "But the kidnappers took me and Lily to threaten you. It was your choice to save me first. Why are you telling me this now?" Xinxingzhou's drunkenness had faded, but his eyes remained icy. "Olivia, I've always been against this arranged marriage. If you hadn't told Grandma you liked me, she wouldn't have forced me to marry you. So, are you saying that if I hadn't been there, you would have only saved Lily?" "Ha," I burst into laughter. "Alexander, you're crazy. Instead of blaming the kidnappers, you're blaming me." I stood up and went back to my room to tend to my wounds. From that day onward, no matter how much pain I felt, I never spoke to Alexander again. Now, the person in front of me was afraid I was in pain, awkwardly blowing on my wounds. My eyes stung, and I closed them, taking a deep breath. I asked, knowing the answer, "What are you doing?" Chin looked up, his smile pure. "When I was a kid and got hurt, my mom used this method. See if it helps?" I nodded. "Yeah, it's better." Satisfied, Chin continued what he was doing. But the atmosphere was quickly disrupted. "Boss Chin, I heard someone was causing trouble at your repair shop, so I rushed over." "Wow. Where did you find such a pretty girl?" A tall man with tattooed sleeves walked in through the door. Upon seeing me, his eyes lit up. This is rare. I think this is the first time I've seen such a beautiful girl here. Big Flower Arm said, a strange blush creeping across his face. Sheen saw this and shielded me behind him. Thanks, but the matter is already resolved. The rest doesn't concern you. I'll buy you a drink another time. Big Flower Arm froze, then realized what was happening. Old Sheen, now that you've got a girl, you don't even want to deal with your brothers anymore? He turned his head arrogantly and huffed loudly. It seemed like he was angry. Sheen sighed, then pulled him aside and whispered, "Can't you show some consideration? Go somewhere else to cool off." Boss Sheen, is she your girlfriend? Does she look like one? Yes. They're a perfect match. You're a smart kid. I don't care, you have to treat me to wedding candy. You're in for it. The two of them were still whispering to each other nearby. Although they had deliberately lowered their voices, their words still reached my ears clearly. To ease the awkwardness, I pretended to be very busy, looking left and right, up and down, but dared not look at them. A few minutes later, Big Flower Arm was persuaded away by Sheen. After they left, Sheen asked me, "Where do you live? I'll give you a ride home." Perhaps it was out of selfishness, but I suddenly didn't want to go home so soon. Anyway, my parents were always busy with their own affairs, and even if I didn't go home for a month, they wouldn't bother to ask. As for Alexander, if I guessed correctly, he had probably reincarnated as well. He must be eager to spend the rest of his life with Lily. In my previous life, we were married for 7 years, but he never took me to any social events or shared a bed with me. When others asked about me, he always looked cold and eventually turned me into a laughingstock in the circle. In this life, I'll stay far away from him. So I pleaded with Sheen, "Can you take me in for a few days?" I carefully tugged at the hem of his shirt and shook it. Considering both lives, he should be a good person. And he has the ability to protect me. If I cling to him, would he refuse? Sheen suddenly lowered his head toward me, his gaze intensely hot. "Little girl, if you keep this up, I might take you seriously." Perhaps because we were so close, I could even smell the fresh scent of soap on his body. I swallowed unconsciously and was about to speak when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "What are you doing?" It was Alexander. He had come with the police. "Are you okay?" Alexander looked at me, his concern seeming genuine. I spread my hands. "Do I look like I'm in trouble?" Alexander remained silent. Lily walked in shortly after. She glanced at the repair shop, which had returned to normal operations, and asked directly, "Olivia, how did you escape from the kidnappers?" "As far as I know, there were 6 of them, your hands were tied, and you were in an unfamiliar place." "I'm really curious. What does Lily mean by that?" Everyone knows that the Lins and the Shins were planning to arrange a marriage alliance, but they're both eyeing that piece of land in South Downtown, and the auction is in 10 days, the highest bidder wins. But just at the most critical moment, this happened, and the ransom was astronomical. "Olivia, I really can't help but think something fishy is going on. Is she suspecting that I hired the kidnappers?" I admit, I've never been this speechless in either of my lives. Lily's experiences in her previous life really left me feeling helpless and sympathetic. But in this life, it's like I saved her. Yet after being rescued, the first thing she does is turn around and accuse me. It's truly heartbreaking. I suddenly raised my hand and shouted, "Officers, someone is falsely accusing me." Then we were all taken away. While waiting for the interrogation, Lily continued to insist. "Olivia, why won't you speak up?" I snorted coldly, "Why should I tell you? You're not a police officer." Lily was momentarily speechless. Alexander couldn't stand it anymore and immediately stood up to speak for Lily. Lil just wants to understand the truth so she knows what to say and what not to say during the interrogation." "What? You two want to lie to the officers?" Alexander stood up angrily, pointing at me and said, "Olivia, you're completely unreasonable." Sheen, who had just come out of the interrogation room, saw this and immediately stepped in front of me. "Put your hands down." His tone was flat, yet carried an undeniable sense of pressure. I hid behind Sheen, unable to see their expressions, but I could sense the tension in the air. I heard Alexander ask, "Who are you to her?" Sheen turned his face toward me, his lips curving into a smile. He countered, "What do you think?" I looked up, staring at the overly perfect profile of his face just inches away. Without thinking, I used my thumb and index finger to make a heart shape. Alexander saw this and his face darkened several shades. Just then, the police called him over to take a statement. After a round of questioning, the situation became clearer. The police had identified the suspect, and now they could only arrest the kidnappers first before proceeding with the investigation. But I knew it was Alexander's rival who had done this. As we left the police station, Cheen looked at me and said, "It's okay." "What?" I was completely confused. He explained, "The thing you asked me about this afternoon, it's okay." I finally understood that he was referring to my request for him to take me in. "It's just me and my mom at home, and she's back at the old house. I usually stay at the repair shop, so you can stay there." I was about to agree. Alexander interjected, "Liv, your uncle and aunt already know about your kidnapping. They should have landed by now and are on their way home. Are you sure you don't want to go back?" I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness. Alexander, a stranger, knew more about my parents than I did. As far back as I could remember, they had always been busy, so busy they forgot my birthday, so busy they forgot to attend my parent-teacher conferences. I even deliberately did poorly on exams or hurt myself just to see them. Because only then would they briefly appear and bestow a little bit of their meager love upon me. Eventually, I stopped hoping and began learning to celebrate my birthday on my own, spending money to hire a flower seller to attend my parent-teacher conference because she was kind and beautiful. I grew up alone like that until I met Alexander. On the school basketball court, he casually blocked a ball that was about to hit me. Under the sunlight, the young boy looked exceptionally handsome, with a few drops of sweat glistening on his forehead. He raised the corner of his eye slightly, with a hint of arrogance, and said, "Be careful, classmate." His voice was cold and indifferent. At that moment, I was completely captivated. At that time, I was timid and quietly said, "Thank you," then ran away. After that, I began to pay attention to him intentionally or unintentionally, and I also knew he had a very close childhood sweetheart. However, their relationship seemed to have only reached the stage of childhood friends. The silent crush of youth spread quietly in my heart. Even if we happened to meet by chance later on, an accidental glance would make my face flush and my heart race. I was well aware that in the future, I would likely have no say in my own marriage. So when I found out that the arranged marriage partner was Alexander, I was overjoyed. My parents also approved of Alexander and actually kept in touch with him more often than usual. In my previous life, when I suggested divorcing Alexander, they outright refused. "Alex is so capable and can tolerate your bad habits. Why don't you cherish him and cause us so much worry?" I knew that after we got married, the interests of the Lins and the Shins were intertwined, and divorce wasn't something that could be done easily. So I endured year after year until I developed depression and started self-harming, finally forcing Alexander to agree to divorce me. Since I've been given another chance at life, I want to live it for myself. That's why I don't want to go home. However, I suddenly remembered there was one unresolved matter I needed to handle, so I had to return home. Before leaving, I took the phone from Cheen's pocket, entered my own number, and dialed it. Only after hearing the ringtone did I return the phone to him. "Make sure to save my number. I'll come find you in a couple of days." After saying that, I hailed a taxi and drove away. From start to finish, I didn't even glance at Alexander. When I got home, I found my parents sitting in the living room waiting for me. Before I could say a word, they started scolding me. "Alex told us everything that happened today. Can you please stop being so stubborn? Those were kidnappers. You could have lost your life. How could you let Alex save someone else first?" My mother sighed heavily at this point. "How can we trust you to run the company?" They didn't trust me, so they handed the company over to Alexander in the first place. Then they went off to pursue their youthful dreams, living comfortably. My father, who had been sitting on the sofa, suddenly spoke up, "Why don't you just get married already?" "I refuse," I stated firmly. "I came back to tell you that tomorrow I'm going to the Shins to call off this engagement. Whether you agree or not, this time I'll make my own decision. And don't try to threaten me with the company. You can give it to whoever you want, I don't care." Anyway, I don't want it anymore. Having been reborn, I now knew the trends for the next 7 years. I wouldn't end up destitute. After saying those words, I returned to my room. They must be even more disappointed in me now, right? It didn't matter. The next morning, I got up early. But I saw my mother had prepared breakfast and was waiting for me. I heard from Aunt Fong that you got up last night to look for something to eat. It's my fault for not asking if you had dinner. I stood there dumbfounded, unable to understand why my mother had suddenly become so gentle and considerate. She tenderly tucked a strand of hair behind my ear and said in a self-reproachful tone, "Your father and I reflected on it last night. Maybe we've been using the wrong approach all along. We wanted you to grow up to be independent, so we dared not spoil you too much, afraid of spoiling you. If you want to make your own decisions, that's fine. We're not insisting you marry the Shins." Did they just agree to let me call off the engagement? Suddenly, I felt a pang of sadness. As a child, Olivia had also argued and thrown tantrums, but all she received was scolding. Later, she began to learn to obey and be sensible, thinking that this would earn their attention. In the end, they only looked down on her for being weak and incapable. Now, I've merely learned to use their methods to say some harsh words, and they've changed their minds? Even as the car arrived at the Shins' villa, I still found it hard to believe. Actually, the marriage between the Shins and the Lins was first proposed by Alexander's grandmother. It all started when I saved Mrs. Shin, who had fainted due to low blood sugar, at a banquet. After she regained consciousness, she was very grateful and insisted on adopting me as her granddaughter. From there, we became acquainted. I would occasionally visit the Shins' old mansion for a meal. It wasn't until I met Alexander there that I found out the old lady was actually Alexander's grandmother. The old lady was sharp as a tack. She immediately noticed I liked Alexander. That's how things unfolded. Now, having to tell the old lady in person to cancel the engagement feels a bit unfair to her. After all, she gave me the Shins family's heirloom bracelet. Looking back, there's no choice but to return it. Alexander arrived before me, accompanied by Lily. They were both dressed quite formally, as if they could immediately re-engage after I cancelled the engagement. The main goal was for everyone to be happy. However, when I placed the bracelet on the table, Alexander grabbed my wrist and asked, "What does this mean?" Right, last night I only told him to meet me at the Shins' old house. I didn't mention the engagement being called off. Mrs. Shin looked at the two of us, seeming to realize something. "Liv, did Chuan do something to hurt you?" As she spoke, she shot Lily a sharp glance. I addressed Mrs. Shin respectfully, "Grandma Shun, it was my decision to call off the engagement with Alex." Her tone was calm, as if she were describing the weather. Alexander's pupils suddenly contracted, clearly unable to believe it. "Why?" "Because you left me behind to save someone else yesterday. I think that's the person you really want to marry, isn't it?" I looked at Lily and saw that she was also staring at me, looking stubborn and innocent. "No." Alexander's eyes flickered with self-doubt. "It wasn't you who told me to save Lil first. I was testing you, and the result was obvious." Alexander was speechless. Mrs. Shin sighed and said, "I heard about what happened yesterday. You're a good child, it's Chuan who isn't worthy of you." "Grandma." Alexander suddenly interrupted Mrs. Shin. He gripped my wrist tightly, as if he wanted to crush the bones. "Olivia, I will never agree to this. Forget it." The wound from yesterday hadn't healed yet, and his grip made it bleed again. I endured the pain and suddenly found it amusing. After Lily died in my previous life, he mourned her for 7 years. After being reborn, he rushed to save Lily. I had thought he was deeply in love with her and couldn't wait to marry her. I tugged at the corners of my lips and laughed, "If you insist, then I'll go to the media tomorrow and unilaterally announce the cancellation of the engagement. In the end, it will be the Shin family who loses face." After saying that, I prized Alexander's fingers off one by one and turned to leave. I didn't expect Alexander to chase after me. Just then, Chin's motorcycle arrived at the Shin's doorstep. Not wanting to get into a prolonged argument with Alexander, I simply said, "Sorry, my boyfriend is here to pick me up." Alexander frowned disapprovingly and sneered, "Olivia, are you sure you want to choose such a poor guy as your boyfriend? Can he really bring you happiness? Or should I choose someone like you, who pretends to be virtuous but is two-faced. After saying that, I walked toward Chin. But the next second, my wrist was grabbed again. Ugh, I let out a pained cry. Alexander, who had caused this, finally noticed the injury on my wrist. He panicked and tried to explain. I didn't know you were injured. I lowered my eyes, my smile sarcastic. You say that like knowing would make you care. Chin couldn't stand it anymore. He charged forward and knocked Alexander to the ground with a single punch, fast, accurate, and ruthless. Alexander spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes filled with hatred, but he dared not make another move. Chin saw this and said in a warning tone, "Stay away from her." He then put his helmet on my head, revved the engine, and drove off with me. The motorcycle sped through the mountains, the scenery changing rapidly before our eyes. I leaned against Chin's back, feeling the thrill of the speed. It felt like I could temporarily forget the unpleasantness of earlier. "Girlfriend, where are we going?" Chin's voice came from the front. I chuckled, realizing he had heard everything I said earlier. So I naturally wrapped my arms around his waist and said, "Since you called me girlfriend, can I come to your place? I'm hungry. Of course, my cooking isn't bad. I want 4 dishes. No problem." Chin's laughter echoed through the mountains. I don't know if it was his influence, but at that moment, I felt an overwhelming sense of freedom. Chin's house was bigger than I had imagined. He hurriedly brought me a pair of brand new men's slippers. They might be a bit big, but these are the only new ones we have at home. I slipped them on casually and smiled. It's okay. Good thing I come back occasionally to clean up, so it shouldn't be too messy. Even though he was the host, he was the one who seemed nervous. I plopped down on the sofa, propping my chin on my hand as I looked at him and said, "I can't cook, so you'll have to do the cooking today." Chin didn't immediately start cooking but instead brought over a first aid kit. The wound that had been bandaged yesterday had been squeezed by Shinchuan, causing blood to seep out and stick to the gauze. By now, it had dried and adhered to the wound. Chin carefully poured iodine onto the gauze, trying to separate the wound from the gauze. Such meticulous work, yet he, a grown man, did it with great care. Half an hour later, he finally rebandaged the wound. He didn't forget to remind me, "Don't get it wet for the next 2 days." I blurted out, "But how am I supposed to shower?" "It's okay not to wash for 2 days." After thinking for a moment, he added, "I won't mind." "You dare." "I wouldn't dare." "Humph. Should I go cook dinner?" "Yes." I nodded with a smile. Suddenly, I realized that every time I was with Chin, I always felt particularly relaxed. An hour later, he came out with 4 dishes. They were sweet and sour pork, garlic shrimp, steamed fish, and cold cucumber salad. He handed me the bowls and chopsticks. "Try some." After tasting a few dishes, I gave him a thumbs up. The food was delicious and memorable, just like him. It seemed like I wouldn't have to worry about where to eat in the future. In the afternoon, I received a call from my father. He told me to attend an auction in 10 days. If I could secure the south downtown plot of land, the company would be entirely under my management. I knew about that plot. Besides the Shin and Lin families, several other companies were also eyeing it. In my previous life, I had been through a lot of trauma from the kidnapping incident, and Lily's death had left me emotionally unstable. As a result, I fell seriously ill and missed the auction. Even if I hadn't been sick, I wouldn't have competed with Alexander. At that time, my heart was completely devoted to him, and I believed I had finally found someone I could entrust my life to. However, at that time, the Shin family was facing a debt crisis, and Alexander still faced some challenges in securing that plot of land. In the end, I transferred a sum of money from the Lin family to help him. Alexander eventually won the auction, secured the land, and built a theme park there, attracting numerous investors. Within a few years, he successfully propelled the Shin family to new heights. This clearly demonstrates that the land was a surefire profitable venture, which is why so many people were vying for it. This time, I am determined to secure it. What I didn't anticipate was that Lily would come begging me. Her attitude was completely different from the aggressive one she had displayed just a few days ago. This time, she lowered her stance and pleaded with me in a humble tone. "Can you please not call off the engagement with Alex? Our relationship has always been purely platonic. If you agree, I'll never show my face again. I stared at her in silence, feeling nothing but speechlessness. Yes, in the past, I too believed they were just close friends. But after Lily died, Alexander's behavior was far more than just mourning a good friend. I remember the day he agreed to divorce me. It was the 10th time I had self-harmed after being diagnosed with depression. He came home and found me lying on the floor, covered in blood. He might have been afraid I would die in his house, so he finally agreed to divorce me. But on the way to the divorce proceedings, he suddenly asked me, "Do you know today is Lil's anniversary?" I looked at him blankly and shook my head. I couldn't even take care of myself, how could I remember such things? But my reaction completely enraged Alexander. He angrily pounded the steering wheel and called me cold-hearted and heartless. The life you have now was bought with Lil's life, yet you've never shown any gratitude. You even forgot her anniversary. All you think about is leaving. Do you really think that will free you from your conscience? Olivia, you make me sick. I was so angry that I snapped back, yes, you know how to be grateful. You can't forget her, so why didn't you go die with her? As soon as the words left my mouth, the car began to sway violently and finally plunged straight off the cliff. Even as he was dying, Alexander continued to blame me. We owe Lil this. We should spend our entire lives atoning for her. What right do you have to live in peace? But in this life, none of us owes anyone else anything. I'll see what kind of ending Alexander gets. I gestured to Lily to stop talking. After all, constantly thinking about the past really makes me feel sick. Didn't you get the situation straight? The Shins and the Lins have already tacitly agreed to annul the engagement. Was it Alexander who sent you here? She shook her head. No, I just don't want to see him lose. Olivia, you've always liked Alex, haven't you? This is all my fault. I shouldn't have suspected that you hired the kidnappers, and I shouldn't have suddenly returned from abroad. Otherwise, Alex wouldn't have risked his life to save me and caused you so much pain. I was confused by her words. You don't want to see him lose? Lily explained, the Shin family needs that piece of land in South Downtown to turn their fortunes around. Olivia, since you insist on breaking off the engagement, can you at least not compete with Alex? I scoffed. What are you thinking? Now I finally understood. In my previous life, when we rushed to save Lily, the police had already apprehended the kidnappers, and the 2 huge ransom payments had been successfully recovered. Plus the money I got from the Lin family, Alexander was able to secure that plot of land. But now, because of my self-rescue, the kidnappers were alerted and have already fled to an unknown location. The police haven't obtained any useful leads, let alone recovered the ransom. In that case, the Shin family has lost its advantage in securing the land. Lily still refused to give up. She clenched her teeth and suddenly knelt before me. Olivia, please, I'm begging you. You don't have to love him, but can't you at least not ruin his life? I've seen moral blackmail before, but never such shameless moral blackmail. I bent down, leaned close to her, and whispered. When you heard that Alexander was going to marry me, you went abroad. But after hearing about our engagement, you suddenly returned. You're right, it's all your fault. So you should help him yourself. Your Tang family may not be as wealthy as the Lins, but you could at least offer some assistance. Besides, he used his money to save you last time, not me. You're the one begging me, should I call you foolish or myself? Lily's face turned ashen at my words. She opened her mouth but remained silent. It was best if she could figure it out on her own. If she couldn't, she would be the one to suffer. During this time, I went back home and found that my parents had left again. It seemed that they were still the same, only caring about their own pursuits and never changing. All they needed was a qualified heir, and they didn't care who it was. Forget it, it's not like I care about them anyway. I lay at home for 2 days, and my hand was almost healed. I took a car from the garage and headed straight to Chin's repair shop. But before I could see Chin, I ran into that big flower arm guy again. He awkwardly called out to me, "Hi, sis. Where's Chin?" I asked him. He scratched his head and replied, "Boss Chin is out. Do you need to see him?" As soon as he finished speaking, he slapped his own mouth and muttered to himself, "Can't I just come by without a reason? Look at my clumsy mouth." He then gave me a wide grin, "Sis, take a rest. Boss Chin should be back soon. I nodded and sat down on the sofa. On the coffee table were several sets of different tea sets. I poured myself a cup of tea and sipped it slowly. Big Flower Arm didn't leave. He looked curious and kept stealing glances at me. Seeing me pour the tea, he explained, "I'm a rough guy. I don't know how to do this. Boss Chin usually makes it for me. Don't mind me." I looked up and asked, "What's your name?" "Hunter." "Does he treat you well?" For some reason, I just had this feeling. Hunter shook his head, and I thought maybe I had guessed wrong. Then he said, "No, Boss Chin is good to all of us." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Tell me more." Most of the workers in this repair shop are from impoverished mountainous areas. They all have some physical disabilities. For example, Silent Joe, who repairs engines, can't speak, but he can pinpoint the exact location of a problem just by listening to the sound. Then there's Limping Chin, who does maintenance, and illiterate Dan, who does painting. He can't read a single word. They came to this city looking for a livelihood, but once they arrived, they realized that with their physical disabilities, no education, and no special skills, even finding a decent job was difficult. It was Boss Chin who took them in, gave them time to learn the trade, provided food and lodging, and paid them wages. So they all stuck with Boss Chin, never leaving. I see. I turned to Hunter and asked, "What about you?" At this, his face grew serious for the first time. "I met Boss Chin 5 years ago. I had offended someone and was nearly beaten to death, but Boss Chin saved me. From that day on, I swore to follow Boss Chin for the rest of my life. Anyone who dares to bully him will have to step over my dead body first." To be honest, hearing these words left me deeply shaken. All my life, I've been alone, and there's hardly anyone who truly cares about me. Yet Chin has managed to gather such a group of people and have them follow him loyally. I'm truly envious, and suddenly I can't wait to meet him. "Do you know where he's going?" Hunter thought for a moment and said, "Boss Chin didn't mention a specific location, just that someone was looking for him, apparently at Pinnacle Plaza." As I was about to leave, Hunter seemed to remember something and added, "By the way, sis, Boss Chin is actually quite wealthy, he just keeps a low profile. He originally didn't want us to call you sis, saying you're a girl from a wealthy family and should be addressed as miss." I frowned at that. How could Chin still use such an old-fashioned title? But I never would have dreamed that I'd see Chin and Lily sitting together in a coffee shop at Pinnacle Plaza. I couldn't hear what Lily was saying to Chin, but her eyes were red, as if she'd been crying. Chin kept listening, his brows furrowed the entire time. After watching for a while, I noticed Lily suddenly stand up and move from her seat across from Chin to sit beside him. My instinct told me there was something more between them. If this had been before today, I might have just left and blocked Chin. After being hurt once, I couldn't tolerate any impure relationship. But if it was Chin, I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. Just as I was about to walk into the coffee shop, I saw Chin get up quickly from his seat as if afraid of getting involved in something dirty. Then he and I, who had just walked into the shop, locked eyes. Compared to my calmness, Chin froze for a moment, clearly not expecting me to be here, before striding toward me. "Leave." Lily also came running out at that moment, her face showing a hint of urgency. "Mr. Chin, if you agree, I." Lily's words came to an abrupt halt when she saw me. However, she quickly regained her composure and turned to me, asking, "Olivia, what are you doing here?" "Could it be that you're here to see Mr. Chin as well?" she said, consciously leaning toward Chin. However, Chin was alert and immediately stepped in front of me as she approached. He looked at me with a slightly innocent expression and said, "Liv, I." I feigned a stern expression and said, "We'll settle this later." Lily watched our interaction, her expression growing increasingly somber. "Olivia, I really underestimated you." I shrugged and replied, "Yeah, I think so too." Lily was flustered, her face turning red, white, and blue like a paint palette had been overturned, which was quite a sight. Actually, I've never been the type to take a loss easily. In my previous life, if I hadn't taken people who didn't care about me so seriously, I wouldn't have ended up in such a mess. Chin took me back home. By then, it was almost dark. We sat on the sofa, neither of us speaking. After a long time, he broke the silence. "Aren't you going to ask? You said you'd come back to deal with me." I said softly, if you want to say it, you'll say it even if I don't ask. If you don't want to say it, asking won't make a difference. Chin's face showed no emotion. Do you know why Lily came to see me? I shook my head. On the way back, I thought of many reasons. Maybe Lily had a crush on Chin? Or maybe Alexander didn't like us being together and deliberately sent Lily to annoy me. After all, they were close friends and would do anything for each other. But Chin suddenly asked me if I was keeping an eye on the piece of land in South Downtown. I was shocked. How did you know? Because the usage rights to that plot of land are currently in my hands. It's something my father left to me. How could that be such a coincidence? Wait a minute. So Lily isn't giving up and has gone straight to Chin to try to get it from him? But how did she know that plot of land belonged to Chin? There's only one answer, Alexander told her. When he acquired the land in his previous life, he must have come into contact with Chin and found out. Seeing Chin staring at me, I immediately realized something. You don't think I'm getting close to you because of that piece of land, do you? For some reason, an unpleasant feeling welled up inside me. So, while I was hesitating about him, he was also doubting me. I lowered my head, wanting to laugh, but couldn't. Chin saw this, suddenly cupped my face, and said seriously. Silly, I would never think that. At first, that thought did flash through my mind, but I quickly dismissed it. I trust my judgment. I asked, like when you saved Hunter and the others? Chin raised an eyebrow. No, you're different from them. I saved them because I was kind-hearted, but I saved you because I was moved. Chin, you're really good at this. I pouted, complaining slightly. So good at it, I wonder how many others you've done this to. Chin looked at me with affection, gently moving his hands holding my face, forcing me to lift my head. Then a kiss landed, as light as a butterfly touching a flower, brief and fleeting. It's not about being good at it, it's from the heart, natural, following instinct. I felt my cheeks burn, and my heart raced out of control. Fearing he'd notice my state, I buried my face in his chest. My ear pressed against his chest, his heartbeat thundered like a storm, deafening, beating once, then again, as if shouting his love for me. I closed my eyes and felt it for a long time, then said, Chin, I like you as much as you like me. He didn't answer, but his actions spoke volumes. He held me tighter, as if he wanted to squeeze me into his very bones. The next morning, Chin handed me a document. I took it and saw that it was a land use rights transfer agreement, and my name was written on it. Chin, have you lost your mind? Do you know what this means? I couldn't believe it. How could someone be so foolish? I've withdrawn from the auction. Since you want it, I have it, so there's no reason not to give it to you. Saying I wasn't moved would be a lie. My heart felt as though it were filled to the brim with something, hot and swollen. I blinked, forcing back the tears. This was a good thing, I couldn't cry. Since he had shown such sincerity, I couldn't let him down. I pulled him up and said as we walked, before you sign, let's go somewhere first. I took him to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Chin kept asking me, are you sure you've thought this through? I looked at him and smiled, aren't you afraid I'll take your things, kick you out, and find someone richer and more handsome? Chin frowned and thought for a moment. Well, I can't say I'm richer, but it'll be hard to find someone more handsome. Right, that's why I brought you here, isn't it? I didn't expect Alexander to show up so quickly. Chin and I had just stepped out of the Civil Affairs Bureau, and the red certificate in our hands hadn't even been put away yet. Alexander saw this scene, his face turning ashen, and even the fists he clenched were trembling. He spoke up, Liv, you've finally gone with him. Nervous, I rolled my eyes, not intending to respond. Alexander grabbed my arm, and tears suddenly streamed down his face. Those must be crocodile tears, right? But I did have something to say to Alexander, so I told Chin to get in the car and wait for me. Once we were alone, Alexander blurted out. Liv, I regret it. I really do. You can hit me or scold me, anything, just please forgive me. I sneered in response, regret? Regret what? Do you regret not saving me, or do you regret not treating me well in your past life? Alexander let go of my wrist, and the color drained from his face in an instant. It seemed that even he didn't want to recall the events of his past life. After all, those memories clearly exposed his countless crimes. At that moment, Alexander began slapping himself in the face, saying as he did so, "I was blinded by my own desires. I was wrong. I deserve to die. But Liv, is there still a chance for us?" I remained silent for a moment before asking softly, "Alexander, what do you think?" He stopped moving, lowered his eyes, and looked dejected. Then, as if suddenly remembering something, a glimmer of hope appeared in his eyes. "No, it's Lily. She's the one who ruined us. If she hadn't suddenly come back, none of this would have happened. And I never asked her to come find you. She did it all on her own, acting on her own desires." He grabbed my hand again, pleading humbly, "Please believe me one last time. The only person I've ever loved is you, truly. I know I'm at fault, so I won't ask for anything. I just want you to look at me, even if it means letting me do anything." I stared at Alexander in horror, unable to believe the words coming out of his mouth. I pulled my hand away forcefully and wiped it on my clothes. "Alexander, what do you want?" I wouldn't believe he truly loved me. Once you've experienced true love, you only see this as the trash no one wants. Alexander looked deeply affectionate. I realized it too late. "Anyway, I won't give up on you." I felt a chill run down my spine, as if I were being haunted by a ghost. "Alexander, if you keep this up, I'll call the police." Alexander froze in place, tears streaming down his face like there was no tomorrow. I felt nothing but irritation, desperate to leave. "Alexander, you've never loved anyone but yourself. Whether it's Lily or me, nothing matters more than your own interests. But you're not willing to accept it. Why am I living a better life after leaving you? So you want to drag me back into the abyss. But Alexander, I'm not alone anymore. My current husband is fierce and ruthless in a fight, and he has a group of men willing to die for him. If you value your life, feel free to come try your luck." After saying that, I glanced at Lily, who was standing nearby. I had noticed her following us earlier but hadn't said anything. I hoped she could see Alexander's true colors and not let herself be used by him anymore. It was like a farce coming to an end. After my father found out I had successfully secured the land, he kept his promise and handed over the company to me to manage. I didn't tell them about my marriage to Cheen because I didn't want anyone to disturb us. I just wanted to live a quiet life with him. Every day, I shuttled between the company and home, and time slipped away quietly. Soon after, I heard that Lily was going abroad. The person who loved Alexander most in this world no longer wanted him. Before she left, she posted a lengthy article on social media, condemning Alexander for breaking his promises and being cold-hearted and ruthless. Out of boredom, I shared the article to generate some traffic. As a result, the already debt-ridden Shin family was further impacted, causing their stock prices to plummet repeatedly. It was rumored that they were on the brink of bankruptcy. Alexander is busy beyond belief, scrambling to find help everywhere. But who would be willing to help him now? So he turned to me again. "It's been several months since we last met. I'm currently busy developing that piece of land, and thinking about the fortune I'll make in the future gives me endless motivation. But the Alexander the First see now is unrecognizable from the one I saw a few months ago. His face was gaunt, his eyes were dark and puffy, his beard was unkempt, and he exuded an air of despair." I asked him, "Do you want me to help you?" To my surprise, he shook his head. He told me, "Liv, I've been diagnosed with depression. I haven't slept properly in months. I finally understand the pain you went through. This is my karma." I forced myself to suppress the smile on my lips and said, "How can this be karma? This is your blessing. Think about it, in your previous life, you died regretting that you couldn't save Lily. Even if you had achieved fame and fortune, with me by your side, you still wouldn't have been happy. Now, the heavens have given you another chance. Though you have nothing now, you've made up for the regret of your past life. That's enough. The heavens haven't been unkind to you. People can't be too greedy. When you gain something, you lose something else. You can't have it all." That was the last time I saw Alexander. 3 months later, on the night Shin's company declared bankruptcy, Alexander, drunk and suffering from depression, fell into the bathtub. By the time he was discovered, he was already cold. Indeed, karma comes back around. When Sheen heard about this, he was massaging my back. My father once told me that a person of poor character is doomed to fail in the long run. I turned over and couldn't help asking, how far do you think we can go? Sheen thought about it carefully and said, given our character, 100 years wouldn't be too much, would it? I agreed wholeheartedly. Of course not. Then, as your husband, wanting to eat a proper meal isn't too much, is it? Sheen stared at me, his eyes burning with intensity. The reflection of me in his eyes was like the most vibrant rose in the world. They say loving someone is like nurturing a flower. Sheen cherished me deeply, unwilling to let me suffer even the slightest hardship, and I became more and more outstanding as a result. The things I hadn't obtained in 2 lifetimes, Sheen gave me in abundance. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed his lips, saying, that's not unreasonable.